I'm really excited. Obviously, I've enjoyed these huddles so far. We've had a bunch of them. I think this is probably our 14th or 15th huddle so far. We've covered things like worship and teams, and a bunch of other topics. And just been sitting down with Joe and Mark planning out the rest of 2020. And so we have some really fantastic topics coming up. And the goal of these is really for two things. One is connecting us with you. We want to be able to resource you and help you grow as leaders and give you the tools that you need to be successful, to go from where you're at to a multiplying leader, where God has you and where God's taking you. The other thing is we want to be able to connect people with each other. I mean, we have New York represented here. We have I know you guys are up in Minnesota, Michigan. People are all over the place. Indiana. And so it's fun for us to see each other's faces besides Oasis Conference, right? And so that's another benefit too. And so we're glad you guys are here. And Pastor Chris, I'm glad you're here too. I was just saying that you just got back last night and you're here with us today. Yep. And thanks so much for being here with us.
So good to be here.
So we're going to be talking about teams and collaboration and building trust today, specifically building trust. Pastor Chris, do you want to kick us off? What is... I know we're talking about building a culture of trust today. What does that mean?
Well, again, from my study and also from my experience, unless we have trust on a team, you're not really going to have the dynamics that we've been talking about previous to this huddle, all the dynamics that speak to the issue of working together, having collaboration, having the best honest conversation. All that comes from the foundation of trust. And once you have trust, trust is, being able to have a trust in the skills that are in the room, a trust with the ability to have integrity within the room and the people. If that's strong, or if it's violated and needs to be rebuilt, in the team dynamics, because during the different teams I've worked with, like sometimes there's a lack of trust. Sometimes it just comes in the process that you find out, well, I used to trust, but the last time I said something, my head got chewed off. So can I trust being honest again? Because the team dynamic lost some trust. And again, you only have to be on a team where the trust is not there. And you immediately will understand that the consequences of that, or the significance of either having trust or not having trust on a team. Yeah. So I contend that it's the ability to establish, grow, and extend and restore trust if needed, makes it a crucial component for team dynamics.
I actually saw you say one time, I think I got it from you, that 49% of employees only 49% of employees trust senior management. And I know from that's a pretty crazy stat. And thinking about like, hey, if I'm one of the senior leaders and only half the people in my organization trust me, that's not a great place to be.
That's right. That's right. I've actually been on a team where it was very clear. I used to work for a company that's about 15 minutes from here. I'm in Lima, by the way. And about 15 minutes from here, I worked for a company, and the head boss lost trust in all the employees that were under his, we had probably a good 100 employees under his leadership. And they just began to lose trust in him for all kinds of reasons: the way he handled them, the way he spoke to them, the dynamics of the unfairness that might be there, the politics that were in the team. And I saw it live and well what would have been potentially a great team was disintegrated just by the way this guy handled himself and lost the trust of his own employees.
That makes sense. So we've talked about, you mentioned a few things. You've mentioned some character stuff. You've mentioned like outside skills. So it seems like, character is the internal, and then the competence or the outside skills are the external things.
Yeah, I think that's the two major dynamics are character and then the second is competence. In other words, so for example, if you're going to build trust on a team, it starts obviously in our context with, or any context really, with the context of character. And I could talk to you a little bit about that in a minute.
Yeah.
And then the second dynamic obviously is the competency. If you have a leader, I remember watching Band of Brothers, which is a great war movie, and they had the guy was a great drill sergeant, but when they went to battle, he could not make decisions that were healthy for the team, and the whole team lost their trust in him. So again, competency as well as character.
I remember that scene. That was interesting. So I guess that begs the question: how can I grow the trust on my team? I think that there's some obvious ones, like over a long period of time. But is there other things that people are looking out to grow my credibility, my reputation with my team?
Yeah, the kind of where I pull it off again, going back to what I was saying, character includes your integrity, your motive. I think motive, by the way, I was sharing with the Council of Elders, Elam Fellowship, and I was sharing with them that the biggest dynamic or the biggest conversation today that's on, I would say, most of the podcasts I've listened to. When I say podcast, I mean the general podcast itself. EntreLeadership, Andy Stanley, Greg Rochelle, they're all talking right now about motive. And again, what is your motive? What's the real motive behind you being on a team or leading a team? And if you have impure motives or selfish motives versus the motives that would build trust, it changes the dynamic. So integrity, motive, and intent with people is all a part about character. Competency, it includes the capability, skills, results. I like one teacher that one book that I was reading on the whole idea of competency, and he said competency is best defined by having a good track record. What is your track record? What's the wake look like behind the boat? And so the credibility factor comes up. I call it credibility. Basically, am I credible in those two areas, in the area of competency and in the area of character? Let me give you what I call 4 characteristics of someone who is credible. I wrote these down because I think this would be helpful to kind of give you some discussion, but also give you an opportunity to maybe ask questions as we go along. But these are 4 characteristics that I have put together regarding somebody who's credible. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1 says, "A good name is to be chosen rather than riches, a loving favor rather than silver or gold." Number 1, I think the first characteristic is just that word, honesty. People would rather you be honest than act like you're something different. Honest about your strengths and honest about your weaknesses. I actually served on a team here at the fellowship one time. And what I found is the older generation, for some reason or another, and I don't mean this to be across the board, but it did work out this way. I was in a meeting, and I had, it was a meeting under my former president, President Ron Bergio, called us all together and asked me to chair the meeting. And I did this little test, and we went around the room, and I was asking people if they would be willing to share a weakness in their life. And I found in this particular setting, these are people that if I mention their names to you today, most of you would know them, that they literally were unable, they struggled sharing about their weaknesses. And again, I'm really, really excited about reaching the next generation. And one of the things that I've learned is the next generation wants to know, if you're going to be a person of honesty, can you get honest about your weaknesses, not just your strengths? And I think that's something that that we have to be willing to be transparent about. We have to be willing and be careful of any sense of narcissism in us that's unable to even detect that there might be any weaknesses. Is there anybody in your life that could help you define, this is a weakness? I think you don't see it. It's a blind spot for you. But either way, I think the key there is to be honest.
I was going to say,
Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say two things. It's really interesting because it seems like being honest about your weaknesses can make people feel like they're incompetent sometimes.
Yes,
But I think the authenticity overrides that. And
absolutely.
like you said, you have a wake of authentic, and you have how did you describe it? A wake of credibility in the past.
Correct. That's right.
Uh, and I think that authentic relationship is really powerful in those situations.
Yeah, that is. And again, when you're honest about your strengths, what that means is you're clearly sure about who you are
Yeah.
in the area of strengths, not just coming up with. One of the things I feel every one of us has probably been in a meeting, and again, we're talking about teams, whether it's a team could be a meeting, but that's where a lot of teams function in meetings. So that's where you test this whole idea of trust is in meeting experiences more often than not. And sometimes, it's better just to shut up and not talk if you don't have a strength in a
Yeah.
particular area. And it's okay. There's something good to know that, hey, I just don't know that much in that area. And I've even, especially even now I'm the president and head of a lot of teams. Sometimes I'll hear somebody start talking about something and I say, I've never heard that word before. Can you tell me what it means? Something like that. Now it's a little intimidating, a little embarrassing sometimes to be honest about a level of ignorance, but I'll tell you, it goes a long way when it really comes down to it to be able to build trust. And so
I forgot who said it, but it's I'm not necessarily the smartest person in the room, but sometimes I just got here first. That's why I'm the leader.
That's right. That's right. The second area or second characteristic that makes you a credible leader, which again, credibility, I just want to reemphasize, is as you're credible, you build trust. So in your credibility, that's the wake. And that is, number one, is you're honest. Number two, are you a forward-looking person? I just sense that somebody like right now, I'll give a really good live example. I hope he hears me talk about this. And that is Fred Antonelli has been appointed by our board to be the new president of Elam Bible Institute and College. He'll take that role in June. And one of the things that helped me as one of the board members make the decision to choose him amongst the other candidates was his ability to be forward-looking. There's just something about forward-looking. Let me just say something about this. When we're forward-looking, that does not disrespect the past. It builds on the past. It doesn't disrespect the past. Yeah. But when we're forward-looking, everybody has a chance to get in. If all you do is on teams is talk about the good old days without being forward-looking, then the credibility goes down. And so my heart is always doing it. Bill Johnson said in a book that I read, he said, don't focus on your past at the expense of your dreams. And I really think that's pretty cool. I think it's okay to focus on the past, but not at the expense of your dreams. And I think credibility involves forward looking. The first question to ask a leader is why, but then you also need to ask the question where. Trust is built when people know not only why you're meeting, but where you want to take me. Where do you want to take me? So I think it's good when you're working with teams to define the why and the where. So and again, sometimes the team itself is trying to discover what the where is. If people feel like you already have a where and you haven't informed them, you lose credibility.
Yeah.
Are you with me? In other words, if I was meeting with all of you right now and said, okay, I'm going to get these guys and that lady to move in this direction, and I'm wanting them to go there, but I haven't let you know that, you're going to feel moved. You're going to feel forced. Whereas I feel that a good, healthy team, it's better that I say to you, look, by the end of this meeting, this is where I want us to be. Mm-hmm. And now I've built credibility with you because I've already labeled it where I'm forward looking. Yeah. So, but sometimes the team itself comes back and says, this is something we really need to discuss. So I feel comfortable by the end of this meeting where we are going. So
that's great.
So that's the second characteristic. The third characteristic I have to be credible is the word inspiring. If I want people to be a part of my team and be excited to be on my team, if I'm the team leader, and or if I'm a team contributor, just maybe not the leader, but a part of that team, I'm looking for people who are inspiring. I want to be inspiring. I want to
Mhm.
be on a team where I feel there's genuine enthusiasm. Jesus kind of treated his team that way. He said to his team, look, greater things shall you do than I've done. I mean, he inspired his team to go forward with this whole mindset of encouragement. I did a study in the scriptures of encouragement, and there's all kinds of people. Moses encouraged Joshua. God encourages Joshua about Moses and about your role as you take over for Moses. Hezekiah, you can find all kinds of stuff in Hezekiah, Ezra. Prophecy, the whole reason we have prophecy in scripture is for the building up of the church, the word for encouragement. Paul sends Timothy encouragement in his letters in First Thessalonians. And if you look at Barnabas, he was called the son of encouragement. I'm
Yeah.
bringing all this up to say that credibility is not only established, it's strengthened by encouragement, by inspirational people being a part of your team.
Yeah.
I just feel safe when I'm around people who want to say, hey, include me in on their team with the mindset of being encouraged. And,
Yeah.
let me give you 3 quick lessons that might, some people just love getting a sermon anytime anybody talks. So here's a good outline for anybody who want to do a sermon. And that is 3 insights from the life of Barnabas when it comes to encouragement. Number 1, encouragement involves giving. It says Barnabas in Acts chapter 4, verse 36. Barnabas basically sold everything he had and gave stuff. Barney was a giver. Another area of encouragement is to stand with somebody. We all know the story about how he stood with John Mark
Mhm.
when Paul had a problem. And then number 3, encouragement involves compassion. The word compassion comes from the word to suffer with somebody. Suffer is the word passion, like the Passion of the Christ movie.
Mhm.
And so compassion is to stand with somebody who is suffering. And there's nothing like being a part of a team when somebody picks up that you're not having a good day and they catch you at the water cooler or at the break and say, hey, you doing okay? Can I pray with you? Can
Mhm.
and being sensitive in team meetings that while we are trying to reach goals, that caring for one another is as valuable as trying to accomplish a goal. We may walk out of the room having a goal to make a decision, and we should. But in the middle of that, were we sensitive to each other, or were we encouraging to each other? Is there a possibility that we got so passionate about our opinion that we pushed through and weren't sensitive? All of this stuff
I've
will,
never done that.
of course not. And then the last thing I would say is being authentic. And authenticity is, again, in Barnabas's life, he was authentic. Um, to be authentic, you have to have a level of transparency.
Yeah.
And again, I talked a little bit about where I've seen teams that aren't that way. And transparency is about being real. And again, people, they trust is strengthened in our own, even if as small as a team as a husband and wife. As you're authentic, as you're transparent with each other, it builds trust in your relationship, and it provide, you need to have a sense of vulnerability, genuineness, and it takes those 3 things in order to be a part of a sense of credibility. So those are the things that I see in the life of Barnabas, and he was transparent. He knew what he was doing. The last thing I would say is, besides everything I talked to you about when it comes to the character, is the word competency. Right now, I just met today with my team. I sat down with them, and it was kind of interesting. I was asked some questions on a particular topic for the future direction of our role, where where it comes into play with the area reps and regional directors. And we were going over some things as we're planning a meeting in February with all of them in Florida. And I was saying to Joe and Alex, who were part of my team, I was saying, you know, this is one area I'm getting a little concerned about. Are we overstepping? Are we doing, you know, now I took a risk that I might be offensive in asking those questions. But again, in order to be competent at that next team meeting, we needed to be aware of where we're going, what we're doing. So competency is about having a good track record. So, and two questions I ask everybody when it comes to competency is, are you prepared? So if you're going to have teams, are you prepared to lead the team? You may be gifted, but have you prepared well enough? You know what I'm saying? And just now, you heard I got off a plane yesterday from Kenya, and literally only had like 5 hours sleep in the last 48 hours, and came in and worked a full day today. And to be honest with you, I said to Josh right before we started, I said, man, I hope I'm ready. Because I knew if I wasn't ready. So I asked him, he stepped out a bit, and I reread my notes and got all ready again. I mean, my notes were on the table, but was I prepared? You see what I'm saying? My notes, I had prepared the lesson, but I knew if I hadn't gone through my notes real quick, all I would be doing is reading them and winging it. And I didn't want to wing it today. I wanted to be able to be ready for you. As soon as I hang up the phone today from you guys, I'm going home to bed. but I wanted to be prepared. And then the second, are you skilled? Are you skilled? Do you train yourself? Not just are you prepared, but am I continuing to improve my skill as a leader? In my case, when I'm leading teams, am I improving my skill in the areas of my competency so that I show up and I become the best CEO, or I become the best exec? I become the best financial officer in my role, whatever role I play on a particular team. So,
and it's interesting because I feel like I've been in both areas where I'm not prepared, but I have the skill to overcome it, which isn't a good long-term solution. And there's times where sometimes my being prepared actually helps me when I'm not skilled enough. It's like I can go and find something, or I can go and say, who on my team has the skill to overcome my weaknesses in this area?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I'm following your plan on the dialogue with me, Josh, but I just want to also say something else that, that's coming to me. And that is this, how you handle, I mentioned this in the beginning, how you handle different people on your team. Let me talk about my employees here. My wife works for me, right? I mean, she works here in the office. She does a great job, but she's not here as much. So there was some prime property in our building that she had an office. She had a big office, and she was only coming into the office one day a week. And I said to her, Carol, I said, honey, you've got like the second biggest office here. I said, if you're not going to be using your office, I need to give you a smaller office. Now, I wasn't thinking at the time that the reason I asked her, because, I had to go home with her. I can do that to everybody else in my office, but I had to go home afterwards. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But here's what I was thinking in my heart. And again, I talked to her about this, and for the record, she moved. I moved her out of their office and set her up in another office. And we have 2 employees in the old office that she's in now. And, but I really believe when I made that decision, because everybody worries about nepotism when it comes to your team. When it, do you treat Carol differently? Well, obviously I treat her differently. I go home with her, but when it comes to fairness of team dynamics, you have to be able to build your trust in your team by saying, I'm treating my wife in fairness with the other dynamics of expectation I would have with the other team members. And so it was, for me, while difficult, because I knew that my wife could possibly take it personal, I knew that if it was anybody else, I would have made that same decision. And that's what helped me make the decision. So that's a good example of building trust with my other team members is I'm willing to do with anybody, even if they're related to me, and treat them as fair as I can anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm perfect in that. In fact, I probably am not, because I'm sure there's blind spots. However, I felt that that was an area clearly where I felt the people were going to watch me. How's he going to handle that? I have Joe just came in on our talk here. It's good to see you, Joe. And but you know, I have friends that I work with, and how do you handle the people on your team? See, it's not just in the one time, it's your track record. How is your track record that builds your credibility, that builds trust? It's not just a one-time thing. And then the last thing I would say is this. I learned this from Bill Hybels. And that is, I talked to Josh about this when we were putting this kind of talk together about 5 months ago. And that is, am I willing to call people out when they violate trust? I think that's a big deal. And there's times when that has to be done one-on-one, you know, like after the meeting is over or after a team dynamic. You go to that person privately and you say, hey, you know, the way you spoke to so-and-so at that team meeting, you know, now more often than not, I have failed at doing that when I really felt I should have done it in the room, when I saw the violation.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I waited till afterwards, but then the other team members did not get the benefit of seeing me correct somebody who was not being encouraging or violating something. I called it a foul. That's what I got from Bill Hybels is, hey, that's a foul ball.
Yeah.
And me not being a sports person, I would have come to that on my own. But after Bill Hybels taught on that years ago, you know, I looked up what a foul was, and I found out that it's in basketball and all that. And
he should have said rounders.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. but anyway, but my point is I've said that in meetings. I've literally done that in meetings. I remember years and years ago, I had an older lady who was served on my eldership board at Lighthouse where I pastored, this real old lady. And this sweet little old lady started making some comments, and behind her back, an older, not older than her, older than me. I was 27, 28 at the time, but I'll never forget this. But he was behind her back going like this, you know, thumbs down on everything she was saying. And I called his name out. I won't use his name, but I said, Frank, you need to respect her. I don't even care if everyone in this room disagrees with what she's saying right now. She has the right as an elder on this team to express her opinion. Well, boy, nobody had ever done that to Frank before. But that day I established my leadership. That day I established that this is going to be a team. And if you're going to be in this room, everybody gets a voice. Are you seeing what I'm saying? So
absolutely,
those dynamics help build and strengthen team. It's not just talk, it's action. So,
and I think a lot of us, everybody here, can think of situations where it's an interaction like this is going to cost somebody. It's going to cost me as a leader for not addressing it. Yeah. It's going to cost me as a leader if I address it poorly. It's going to affect somebody else in the building if I don't address it, or, you know, and so those are not to be taken lightly, and they're difficult decisions, but we can't, because we're leaders, we need to take some kind of action. Correct. You know, inaction is our action if we don't do something about it.
That's correct. So good. So good. Yeah. So basically trust is built. I think everybody, my approach to trust, whether it's competency, character, or whatever, is I give everybody the benefit of the doubt at the beginning.
Yeah.
In other words, I don't expect you to earn trust first away. I mean, I think we all do earn trust, but if you come into my room, or if I've been a part of a team, I'm just going to assume that the people who are in this team have already been selected because of their status and because of, so I already give everybody the benefit of the doubt and start with trust. I don't start with, you need to earn your trust before I trust you. I give the benefit of the doubt. So that might be something else to think about too, is, you know, I mean, certainly if it's a team that I'm selecting, I wouldn't have selected him if I didn't trust him. So,
Yeah.
excuse me.
I have a question for you before we get to others' questions or situations
Yeah.
about number 3, inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a difficult one for some people because some people are naturally inspiring. It's
Right.
like every single word is like an "I have a dream" speech. It's like, oh my, like, how are you fitting in your body? And then I know there's some people that I've worked with that they sometimes they would consider themselves pragmatic or
Yep.
realistic, but I met both good and people that go about that in a good way and a bad way. But I think a question that kind of person, the more detail oriented people, the people are saying, how can we actually put this into practice?
Yeah.
They're saying, hey, I feel like a parachute in every situation where I am slowing everyone's dream down. How
Right.
does a person like that be inspiring and gain credibility in those situations?
Yeah, I think if they could give stories of their credibility of how they're concerned for things like budget, or they're concerned for things like their attention to detail, if they could give story to the team, hey, look, I know that it sounds like I'm against you right now, or it sounds like I'm concerned, but let me give you a story of where I challenged this and it helped save us. And, so they bring it brings in the dynamic of not so much of concern, but I want to contribute with the gifts that I bring to the table, is what they're saying. But I also think, I also think that even people who have that, I think when they give, let's say I'm a person that's more attended to concern budget wise and stuff like that. I think if I could come in and say, hey, I believe your ideas are working. I believe your thoughts about this particular discussion are good, so that it could be, if you will, sandwiched with a sense of appreciation for other people, regardless of what might seem to be a wet blanket from what they're sharing.
That's great. Okay, one last question before we open it up. Who is one leader that has done an amazing job establishing credibility in their life with you? Like, if you think about, a really credible leader in your life,
Sure.
who was that, and what were some of the big things that stuck out?
Um, the two people that come to me, obviously my wife, she's learned a lot of credibility with me. She's really blessed me, and I've enjoyed immensely times when I feel like, as obviously my closest team member to me, she's had a sense of God really speaking to her. And I've seen over the years that while all the facts might not be there, that she has my best interest in mind when it comes to how she contributes to any dialogue we have. So obviously my wife, but beyond her, two different people, two men in my life that I believe I would consider. So I can't just give you one. One is on a personal basis, and the other one is on a corporate basis. And both of them happen to be, maybe it's my DNA. Both of them are capable people. Both of them are competent people. But in my case, in both cases, are due to this thing that you just addressed, and that is their ability to believe that I'm going to win, their ability to believe that I will succeed at what I'm doing, and everybody struggles. Everybody struggles at times with your ability. Am I the guy to do this job? These kinds of things. Do I think I will pass or fail, or fear issues, I would guess. But Stacy Klein, on the basis of, he's the dean of students at Elam Bible Institute in college, and he and I have had a 35-year relationship. And I would say he's probably the one that's the most credible in my life on a personal level. He's heard the good, the bad, and the very ugly of Chris Ball over the years, and never once have I felt that he didn't believe in me. His credibility, like, for example, when I went to be the pastor of South Butler, he 100% felt that I was making a big mistake. when I was considering some possibilities of very difficult decisions as my role as president of Elam Fellowship, I ran some things by him as a friend, and he had no problem sharing with me why he felt that my decision would not work. And by the way, it did work, and he came back and told me he was wrong. But all of those things were, I mean, he has publicly said how he completely discouraged me from going to South Butler.
Yes.
He has publicly shared that, and how he was wrong, and I ended up going there because I felt God was telling me. But I really trusted that he was going to give me the honest answer. And so that credibility, honesty, but also the reasons he was giving it, competency, were all in the mix. So I would say Stacy Klein is probably the number one person on a personal level.
That's great.
I would say the person that's probably been the most encouraging to me, believe it or not, I haven't shared this with anybody, but the person that's been the most encouraging to me since I've become the president is the former president, Ron Bergio. And
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and it's not even encouragement. It's that whole issue of credibility that you talked about. I made I can't tell you what it was, but I made a serious blunder. It had to be within 6 months of me becoming the president. It wasn't a blunder. It was, I was being goofy. I was speaking at a women's group. I was invited to speak at this women's meeting. And I was being funny. I was trying to be funny. And I crossed the line.
I thought you just said you couldn't tell us what it was.
Well, I'm not telling you what I actually did.
Oh, okay.
But let me tell you, if I told you what I did, I would be embarrassed about it more than I need to be. Just suffice it to say that I was being so funny and trying to get everybody laughing. And in the middle of it, I said something that was borderline sexual, but beyond by far what I should have said.
Yeah.
And the minute it came out of my mouth, okay? The minute it came out of my mouth, I knew I had to repent.
Yeah.
Well, I sat down and they began to move into worship. It was in New York City, and man, the worship was phenomenal. But I knew I could not let that meeting go on. So they sang 4 or 5 songs, and I got up afterwards, and I immensely apologized for what came out of my mouth in my attempt to be goofy and all that. And I apologized and so forth. And you know, the one lady who was in charge at the time, she said to me 2 days later when I picked my wife up from the retreat, she said, "I will never give you the microphone ever again." That's what she said to me. So that'll give you an idea how rotten it was. I'm leading up to something. But you asked me, you know, who were the two, or you asked me who was the one. I can't give you one. One was more out of my role as president. But anyway, after I came back, I couldn't shake it. You know, here I am, president. I'm thinking I'm doing really good, and then I made this blunder. And I went to Ron Bergio, and I sat down with him, and I said, "Ron," I was embarrassed to tell Ron what I shared. But I sat down with him and said, "Ron, I just want to share with you something I did." And he pulled out a scripture somewhere I didn't even know was in the Bible. And just started reading to me and just loving on me and caring for me. And I knew then I had a man in the gap that would handle as president. You know, I needed to have somebody who I could trust that much. And it broke. Something broke off of me. This condemnation, this shame of what I had done. And about 3 days later, the woman who told me she'd never give me a microphone ever again called me up and apologized and said, "I was so mad at you, but I really feel I overstepped." And I've been invited back 4 times to speak at that event. So there was redemption in that whole thing. But you know,
I'm glad you and Carol worked that out.
Yeah, Carol and I worked it out. But it was interesting though, really interesting that I needed a friend. I needed a team member who knew my heart and knew that I really, you know, I blew it, but it wasn't the end of the day. So in both cases, it was the gifting of encouragement that helped me establish that sense of credibility with teams I work with.
Those are powerful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing those stories. And
Yep.
that's great.
Yeah.
We want to open up for you guys. Obviously, you guys are here because you're interested in teams. You're interested in trust and collaboration. What are some of the questions, or they could be situations going on right now, or just general questions that you have? If you have a question, you can actually just go and unmute yourself, and then we could start from there.
Great. Anybody have something? Yes, sir. Go ahead. Kevin, yeah.
Hi, Josh and Chris.
Yeah, buddy.
Thanks for setting me in the upper square on this Hollywood block of squares.
Yeah.
Mine goes to the inspirational part too. Like, what are there any intrinsic values or virtues that we can display that can inspire? Because when I think of the word inspire, sometimes I feel like that. I don't feel it so much lately, but maybe in my younger time, I felt like it was my responsibility to conduct an Amway meeting, every time we got together, right? Rah, rah, and get the team going. But what intrinsic values or virtues can we have or muster that can inspire, that aren't necessarily, acting like a cheerleader?
Yeah. I think I just gave a couple of good examples. At least the last one with Ron Bergio is the intrinsic value of just saying, "I'll be there for you." It doesn't mean that you have to be a cheerleader or a charismatic personality, but you demonstrate that you're there with them in both when it's bad and when it's good. This was a bad time. In my opinion, it was really bad. And Ron Ron basically said inside of him, he was basically saying, this is not characteristic of who you are. And I'm going to stand on. So I think an intrinsic value that was being operated on that, he's a man who really showed he loved me and he cared about me, and whether he pumped me up or not and built me up. I think other intrinsic areas comes through that sense of track record that, I'm maybe I'm not catching exactly what you're looking for, Kevin, but I just think, being at the meeting on time, that, like, if I'm going to be a leader, I think trust is built that if I'm late every time we get together, then I'm losing trust, and people will show up late. The leader sets the stage. So just the whole idea of how you manage your time, how you handle people, they're all, in my opinion, ways to inspire others. And so that might be a couple of good additional ones.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm reminded too of just even what you said about Barnabas. If you're willing to invest in someone, they know, like, beyond your job. Hey, if your job responsibility says you must have a one-on-one with this person every single week,
right?
That's different than saying, hey, I'll pick you up from the airport on Saturday morning at 7 a.m.
There you go.
Or, I'm inviting your family over to visit my family.
Yeah.
I think of even stuff that we do in coaching is that one of the core tenets is that we believe in people because we know the Holy Spirit empowers people.
Right.
So not calling out people's individual skills and talents they have, but also reminding them, saying, hey, you've got the Holy Spirit inside of you. And that's, we're going to focus on saying, how can the Holy Spirit shine through in these situations?
Amen.
Which sounds a little super spiritual, but it's like, that's the life that we live.
Yeah. It's good, Josh. Good. Yep. Any other questions about integrity, about trust, building trust? Have you lost trust in anybody on your teams? Those would be something good to think about.
Yeah, I actually did at one point, and you know about that situation, Chris. Thanks for sharing those things, by the way, because that gives all the rest of us hope for us ourselves.
Yeah.
You know about this situation. You and Joe did. You've helped deal with that. You did a little bit when
Yep.
my son, who is our worship leader, worship pastor, and youth pastor, decided to go hyper Calvinist, hyper reformed, and ended up having to actually remove him. And you talk about really building trust with the congregation when you
Right.
remove your own son from a leadership position.
Right.
And everybody says afterwards, we really wondered how you were going to handle this, if
Yeah.
you would really stand the test and actually do what needed to be done.
Yeah.
And it makes all the difference. It really does.
Yep.
Even and when you try to maintain that within your family. And we wrestled through that. And my wife finally just said, just do what you have to do. I know what needs to be done.
Sure.
And you just move forward, irregardless of what's going to take place, because you know you're doing what God's saying to do to keep things right.
Yeah.
And just trust him. But thank you for doing this and being honest as well.
Yeah.
We all need to be honest.
Yeah.
And,
Hey, you know, one of the areas I think over time that can hurt trust is gossip.
yes.
If you violate rules within a team, let's say you have a team rule that says confidentiality. Well, recently I was involved in a team that we were told in that meeting that you cannot leave this room and say anything about what we talked about. And I think Mike Kavanaugh was a part of that team, and he said, you know, telemarketing, tell a Christian, you know, and sometimes Christians have a real hard time being confidential. Lack of confidentiality and gossip and stuff like that can break trust on a team immediately. I mean, it's very hard, and if that's not addressed, it breaks down the whole team dynamic. And so you have to deal with that kind of stuff. And fortunately it was dealt with in this situation too. But you know, everybody wants to be the one to share the hot news. You know what I'm saying? But confidentiality. I had a meeting earlier today with Joe and Alex, and I said, listen, guys, this is very confidential, and I really feel like you need to, other than your wives, you cannot be sharing what I'm about to share with you. And I shared something with them, and I trust them. I know they will keep it confidential. But if they broke it, what am I going to do next time? Are you with me? The next time, am I going to be as quick to share if confidentiality or some kind of gossiping goes on? So I just wanted to bring up a negative thing. I don't want to end it with negative, but I just want to bring it up with the concept of trust can be broken. And if that is the case, then trust then does have to be earned. Any other questions or thoughts? Sounds like you all know everything you need to know about this topic now. This is good.
What are some, obviously, as we're finishing up, if you guys have questions, you can still share them. I think I just want to point out a few things, how you guys can stay connected with what's going on with this content and other stuff that Elam Fellowship is doing. Obviously, we have one more of these huddles. I think we're going to be talking about trust again next month, correct, Pastor Chris?
Yeah, it's part 2 of this, basically, yeah.
And so that's December 18th at 4 p.m. So be there or be square. We also have if you weren't able to be here for the first huddle, we actually turned the first huddle into an ebook because we know that everybody can't be here all the time. And so we turned it into an ebook. I can put it in the chat right here. So if you guys want to download that, feel free. And then also some book recommendations that we have. Some of these are oldies and goodies. Some of them are newer. Sticky Teams. I actually just sent a copy of this to Gloria the other day. So if you haven't read Sticky Teams, that's a great book that we've used. And like Ideal Team Player is a Patrick Lencioni book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. His first comment is trust is paramount to a team. And so those are great books. And another one you kind of talked about here a little bit, Pastor Chris, is Leaders Eat Less. It's a Simon Sinek book.
Great.
And the idea of it is that, sometimes we need to make hard decisions and that we need to put ourselves, the idea of serving others, right? And so I know that is a big, a book that a lot of people have read. I mean, we could read a bajillion leadership books and team books, and I think that's good to be ingesting. But I think what you said before is that, credibility, competence, encouraging your team, and honesty. Those are some really important things. Yeah. I'd also say if you guys are dealing with issues on your team, obviously that's one of the reasons that Elam Fellowship is here. You have awesome leaders, Joe, and area reps and area leaders, but we also have a great coaching team, which Pastor Tom is on. Gloria is about to finish up her training. If you guys are working through situations and need someone to listen, someone to process with, someone to ask you questions that's going to keep confidential, that maybe it's not something you could talk to the other people, even in your local church or your local team, we want to be there for you guys in that situation too. Not necessarily coming on saying, hey, this is the answer to your problem, but saying, hey, let's create a space for you to process and discover where God has you going in the situations. Because, I mean, I think it's easy, like, well, Jimmy said something mean about Paul the other day. Those are the easy situations. It's the hard situations where it's like, hey, someone I've been serving with for 25 years, something has to happen with that person. What the heck am I supposed to do? There are some heavy things that come in with our teams, and we want to be there for you in any situation that is coming up. And so just know that we're here to support you and walk with you. Pastor Chris, that's all I have. Is there anything else that is on your heart or on your mind before
I don't remember. There's two things that I want to say before I say goodbye on the whole concept of teams. Number one is I read 5 books while I was in Africa, Playing Time, that kind of stuff. A couple of books were written by Elam people that wanted me to endorse them. They're not out yet, but one of the books that I'm reading, and the reason I bring it up is because I really love studying who will be on my team, because I am going after younger people. I'm trying to learn how younger people think, and there's a brand new book out. It was published 2019. It's called Generation Z by Tim Elmore, and I just read it. It's about 250, 300 pages long, and it's absolutely amazing in that it helps you understand how the young person thinks. We spent a little time today on my exec team here talking about, because we just hired 4 new people, all of them under the age of 33. And it's really kind of a challenge, because you're working with people who are thinking completely different than millennials. The youngest millennial right now is 30 years old. And these people are younger than 30. And Generation Z is wired completely different. I just would recommend, if you want to learn people that are going to be people who you want to hire as a part of your team, whether it's voluntary in a church choir or church worship team, church youth group, or whether it's paid, they're going to be a part of your team. There's 9 chapters where Tim Elmore says, I'll give you an example. He said, there needs to be innovation with parameters is the title of one chapter. And he goes after innovation, but a lot of times what we do is we give free realm to younger people. We either do one of 2 things. We give free realm to them where there's no parameters, or we overcompensate on boxing people in. And so I just felt it was a great book and a good read, and I just finished reading it and plan to go back through it now and highlight it all up and preach about 20 new sermons out of it. But basically it's a great book. And then the other thing I would say is this, back to the question that Josh asked me when he said, is there one person? More and more I feel like there needs to be people who are what's the word, in your life, a part of your personal private team. An apostle. I choose to have an apostle. I choose to have a prophet in my life, somebody who can speak prophetically for me, and then so forth and so on. So basically a friend, an apostle, a prophet, and the next one, a therapist. And I just made the decision after this trip. I haven't been to a counselor in a long, long time. I don't feel like I particularly need counseling, but I thought, I wonder if there is something a counselor would want to say to me that I need to hear, just kind of like a tune-up. And so I'm thinking about even hiring a counselor to sit down with me and saying, hey, I'm in this stage of my life, and what kind of questions are you asking people like me, right now? And just being open. This would be like the team that would help me shape myself. Are you with me? It helped to be around me. So I just thought I'd mention that to you, and I think it'd be a good thing to consider.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Pastor Chris. Thanks for all of you being here, and I'm hoping you got a lot out of it, and that you are walking away not just with more information, but encouraged and saying,
Amen.
I think all of us would say is that even if there's big obstacles in front of you and your team, that God's put you there with those people for a reason. And just knowing that he's got things for you. Sometimes they're lessons. Sometimes it's just all great stuff.
Yeah.
But we believe in you, and God believes in you, and
Amen.
we're behind you. And we're looking forward to hearing the testimonies and stories.
Yeah. Love you all. Appreciate you tuning in.
Thanks, guys. That's awesome.
All right. Take care.